I'm Michael Santos with Prison Professors, and today is, what is it today? Friday, May the 5th, 2023. And I'm spending this day trying to contemplate how am I going to be ready to go into a federal prison in the coming week and train a team of staff members. That is a rather heavy challenge because typically staff members in federal prison don't want to hear from somebody who served time in federal prison. And so I've been really investing a lot of time to think about how am I going to open this presentation? In what ways am I going to engage a group of people that may be, if not cynical, if not hostile, at least cynical of why they have to learn and listen from me. And I thought I'd just take this opportunity to kind of share the opening that I intend to give on Wednesday, and I'm still formulating it in my mind. So here we go. Okay. So I know that many of you may be somewhat skeptical about why a formerly incarcerated person, somebody who served 26 years in federal prison, would have anything to say to you. Or maybe you're wondering why the executive staff, people at the highest level of the Bureau of Prisons, are requiring wardens to bring me into institutions and talk about what can be different. Because there's nothing I can do to tell any of you how to do your jobs. I know that you're professionals. I know that you have been doing this for a long time. And I know that there's a good chance you don't want to hear from somebody who served 26 years in prison. But they did bring me in here to introduce our new course, Preparing for Success After Prison. And in order to teach you a little bit about how to teach the course, because that's why we're here today, I thought it would be somewhat helpful to talk a little bit about other companies that have had innovative ideas and how they turned ideas into something extraordinary. And so as I was preparing to come and speak with you today, before I get into the course, and of course everybody in the room already has a copy of our workbook, Preparing for Success After Prison, the 5-hour course, but you may not know why leaders in the system are asking you to teach this course, or why administrators at the highest level in the Bureau of Prisons are mandating that we bring this course into the Bureau of Prisons. And so in order to kind of break the ice with you, I'm going to ask us all just to think a little bit about a company that all of us know and many of us use, right? I could do this with a lot of companies, but I just happened to be in an office this past week. And while I was in the office this past week, I saw a poster about this company, and I saw that these points that I thought, that would be pretty interesting to introduce to my group on Wednesday when I'm speaking in the Bureau of Prisons. And this is a company that everybody should know. It's the Nike Corporation. We all know that Nike makes great shoes and expensive athletic wear. It's one of the really high-end brands in its group. But that wasn't always the case. In fact, if you read the story Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, who is the founder of Nike, you're going to find that he lists the kind of the history of that great company. And it really began with somebody who had an idea. There was already sneakers. There have been tennis shoes and sneakers around forever. But as a runner, when he was in Oregon running through trails, he realized that he didn't have a shoe that was really built for runners. So he visualized something that did not exist, and he wanted to create it. And although we take Nike for granted right now, I want to put ourselves back in that time frame, because it's kind of the same thing I am doing with this course. I am trying to create something that doesn't exist. And I want to use this Nike model to kind of, talk about it and relate it to your life. And so Nike, what he gave were these 10 points with a couple of sub-points in between them that Phil Knight said this is something he had to communicate to every member of his team. And one of the first messages that he had to communicate was, our business is change. And in the Bureau of Prisons, that's kind of one of the things that we're also having to recognize is that this is an agency that's in the business of change. When I started serving my sentence back in 1987, I was 23 years old, and it was a very different agency from what we see today. Back then, the Bureau of Prisons confined somewhere around 30,000 people, maybe 35,000 people, and the population really accelerated to more than 200,000 people at one point, but it has dropped, now to wherever it is right now. But I think it's still somewhere in the 200,000, 175,000 people range. So it's a lot of people from when I began. But during the time that I was serving my sentence and up until the era of the First Step Act, the emphasis was not on preparing people for success upon release. It was not about reentry. In fact, that wasn't even a term in the Bureau of Prisons when I began. But now there is a mandate for change. And these are not my words, as it's evident by me coming into federal prisons and teaching courses and now having to teach staff. This is an agency that's about change. It's an agency that wants to see something better, and if it wants to see something better, it has to do some things differently. So let's try and incorporate that into our life. How do you see the Bureau of Prisons? And that's a little section where I'll try and get some engagement. What does the concept of our businesses change mean to you in terms of the Bureau of Prisons? Is there something you can offer to that? And that's what I'll ask my members of the audience. So now let's turn to, let me tell you what I think the business of change is. I think the business of change is, instead of just confining people to serve their sentence, the Bureau of Prisons now recognizes there's a mandate and a culture and a mantra to create good neighbors and not just good inmates. There's a mantra to make sure that as professionals in corrections, there's a duty and a responsibility and an obligation to work toward creating that change so that people who are serving time in prison are doing what? Preparing for success after prison. And I'm really grateful to be able to come here and share some of these messages with staff members in this region. So the second component from Nike is we're on offense all the time. If you want to bring some kind of change, going from an archaic sneaker that wasn't built for runners to what we now take for granted, Nike being one of the premier shoe brands in the world, you have to create new markets all the time. You have to create shoes for running, shoes for basketball, cleats, soccer, baseball, football, athletic wear, tennis wear. All types of things, because they're on offense all the time. They recognize to build a great organization, Phil Knight said, he has to always be looking at the market and being on offense to introduce new and creative ideas to serve that market. Well, we have to do the same thing. If we want to look at the prison system and help more people emerge successfully, we got to be on offense. And that means we have to try innovative programs that might change the outcome. And that's going to take us to number 3. You want to strive for perfect results, not a perfect process. He goes on that phase 3 to say, you've got to be willing to break the rules and fight the law. I don't think he's saying be a criminal, but he is saying change the pathway of what people take for granted, okay? He's the first person that thought about creating a specialized running shoe, special for runners. Well, he didn't create processes. He didn't focus on creating processes. He focused on creating the results. But in government, a lot of times the emphasis is on policies and procedures. And sometimes those policies and procedures don't bring the result that we want. In fact, many of the policies and the procedures in the Bureau of Prisons were written 30 years ago. But if we want a different result from what we got 30 years ago, we have to change the process. And so success we can't measure by saying I'm following policy. We have to be thinking about what's the result that we want and how can we get there in a manner that is consistent with the agency's mission. So between all of these, I can try and engage the audience and say, what do you think? What do you think? How does this apply to you? And I anticipate facing enormous resistance. That's just part of the journey, is that, it's difficult to introduce these new concepts that Prison Professors is doing by trying to become an advocacy group that really involves staff members of the Bureau of Prisons and people serving time in the Bureau of Prisons. Let's go to number 4. This is what I'll say now. This is as much about battle as about business. Those aren't my words. That's Phil Knight's word. Those are the words of somebody who's building a great business, somebody who wants to achieve his highest potential. Well, it's something we have to be thinking about here as well. What can we do to build a higher potential? And this is as much about corrections as he says this is as much about battle as about business. Well, the Bureau of Prisons sees its role about making sure people serve the sentence, but it's also about making sure they emerge successfully. And that requires us to be ruthlessly disciplined and looking at how we are doing everything. And that can be a battle, because it's a battle to change minds. It's a battle to change people who are serving sentences sometimes to focus on their life 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's a battle to get people who work in the prison sector sometimes to be willing to accept new ideas, even to accept ideas from somebody who served 26 years in prison. How do you feel? What do you think Phil Knight meant when he had that concept of battle or business? This is as much about battle as business. What were your thoughts, right? And I'm going to try and engage the audience. Number 5 in Phil Knight's story is that we should assume nothing. He says that make sure people keep their promises, push yourself to push others, and stretch the possible. So if I'm asking this to our audience, people who've devoted their careers into corrections, I'll ask, how are you pushing yourself? In what ways are you making sure that people keep their promises? Don't assume that because somebody is serving a sentence in prison, they can't emerge as a good neighbor, a good citizen, a good taxpayer. But we have to nurture that. We have to try to disrupt mindsets from both people serving sentences and people working in prisons to create something better. Number 6, live off the land. Now, you could think, what does that mean in the culture of Nike? And what does that mean in the culture of the Bureau of Prisons? Nike is not an agricultural company. Clearly, Phil Knight is using a metaphor. What does that metaphor mean to you? Live off the land. What do you think it meant at Nike? What do you think it means here in the Bureau of Prisons? If you want to know my thoughts on it, there's opportunity always around us. And we have to seize those opportunities and nurture those our pursuit of growing more opportunities. And that's how we use this as this bedrock, or this agency, the Bureau of Prisons, as a catalyst for change and to become more successful. Number 7, Phil Knight says, your job isn't done until the job is done. So I know that people work in government organizations with an expectation of time off and the clear responsibilities, but I would urge facilitators of the Preparing for Success After Prison course to be communicating that message to the participants. Help people serving sentences understand that their job is not done until they are fully ready to emerge successfully with their dignity intact, with opportunities to prosper. And that's one of the things we try to teach in the course. Number 8 are always to recognize the dangers, because there's a lot of dangers when we're trying to innovate. In Phil Knight's case, he would say the danger would be as we get bigger, we build a bureaucracy. Well, in the prison system, we are part of a bureaucracy, and there's a clear definition of what a bureaucracy is. So that's a danger in the corporate sector. In this government sector, it's a reality, so we have to live with it. But we have to show people who are serving sentences, how do they grow even though they're trapped in a bureaucracy? We've got to be concerned about personal ambition. At Phil Knight, that's one of the things he said, The pursuit and the path is to focus on the growth of Nike, not a personal ambition. Same thing with somebody trying to emerge successfully from prison. Focus is on developing skills, not getting other people to see you for being special. C, you got to avoid energy takers and gravitate toward energy givers. Maybe we have to ourselves be an energy giver. We have to be striving to inspire and grow and never asking anybody to do anything that we didn't do. We also have to know our weaknesses. That means, where are we strong, where are we weak, but make sure that we know where we're weak and see if we can't find ways to focus on our strengths. And then another danger is don't get too many things on the platter. So that's an important lesson for anybody that's going through our course. And it's a very important lesson that facilitators are communicating these dangers to participants. We know where recidivism rates are, and we have to do something to work toward overcoming them. 9, it won't be pretty, right? Bringing change is never going to be easy. There are many staff members who work in the Bureau of Prisons that do not want somebody like me, somebody with a really extensive background of being in prison for 26 years in high security penitentiaries, medium security prisons, low security prisons, camps. They don't want to hear from me. But that means I've got to be willing to brave the indifference and the apathy that I will see while speaking in front of a group of staff members for 8 hours or an 8-hour day. I can anticipate it's going to be a tough day and it's not going to be pretty. But at the end, I hope that I leave people inspired and eager to teach the Preparing for Success After Prison course. And then number 10, help them recognize that the job isn't done until the job is done. Wait a minute, I've already seen that once. I think I missed that one. Maybe there was a different one on 10, but I copied and pasted it wrong. So I'll have to find it again. I just want to, so that's kind of how I'll introduce this whole course of our program. And I'm going to just keep practicing this because I've got only a few more days before I have to stand in front of this audience and hold their attention for 8 hours. But it's all part of the advocacy journey. At Prison Professors, we've always been building ecosystems to work toward bringing changes like the First Step Act. But now we're really working on additional changes, expanding the use of incentives in prison, but also introducing really innovative concepts like work release programs in federal prison, or get people talking about it and showing why that makes sense, or expanding the use of commutations or a compassionate release, or making the First Step Act and earned time credits available to every person in federal prison. So these are some of our heavy tasks, and the ecosystem we built requires us to work with staff members, work with people in prison, work with people coming out of prison, help people that are going into the system. It's all one big social problem that we have to fix. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, we should all strive to be the change we want to see in the world. That's all I am doing. If you want to look more about Prison Professors and our work to try and improve outcomes for America's criminal justice system, visit us at prisonprofessors.com. Thank you.